Give it up for Mark Friesen, ladies and gentlemen. Mark Friesen founded an organization called Forum for Canadian Sovereignty. If you want to learn more, go to the website ffcs.info to learn more about everything he just said. I love this point there. He's not afraid to call himself a nationalist. You know, it is our national anthem, after all. But what's happening in Canada is actually nothing new. Guys, I have a brother-in-law who lives in the UK, and flying the Union Jack in the UK, some consider this racist. And they're starting to do the same thing in Canada, where the Canadian flag represents this, that, or the other. I work in media, so this really pisses me off. And it's funny because these are the same people that are talking about, oh yeah, we're all about love and unity. You think that saying the Canadian flag represents hate, you think that's gonna bring the country together? What do you think? No. Absolutely not. So our next speaker, he actually on his way here, they drove all the way across the country, guys, to be here. And they are so Canadian that they hit a moose. They're fine. Everyone's fine. But it's, I just feel like it's a very Canadian anecdote. But our next speaker, speaking of unity and division, he's going to talk about how we need to focus on our common problems, okay, to fight against this division. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Greg Scott.
Hello, everyone. What an honor it is to be here in front of all of you, in front of our nation's capital.
I don't know.
I'm from small town Alberta. Born in Calgary, and I drove here from Brooks. So that 40-hour drive, you can tack on another 5 hours, but every moment of it was worth it. Some of you may know me from Twitter, some of you may know me from YouTube, some of you may not know me from Adam. But there's a few things here that I want to try and tie together, and I'm not much of a public speaker, but if you'll bear with me, we'll get through this, and hopefully it'll all make sense when I get to the end. So, as we know, Canada, we have some problems. We have some issues. We're a divided country. Right now, we are divided by race, by gender, by religion, and by politics. We're squabbling over what color to paint the dilapidated house without bothering to think that we might need to fix up the house. So there are some common problems that affect everybody here and every other Canadian, whether they know it or not. Whether you're on the left or the right or in the center, wherever, these problems affect us all. These problems don't care about your race, about your skin color, about which church you attend, or which political party you support. They affect us all uniformly. So what are these common problems that we all face? They're not always easy to identify. It takes a little bit of time to be able to root through all the crap from the media and the government in order to find these common problems. Rampant government corruption in this building that has been going on for decades and decades. They don't even try and hide it anymore. We have government-controlled media that promotes a very specific narrative. So specific that our government feels that they need to pay them extra to do it. This system that's designed to keep us all in debt, afraid, and dependent. This system that wants to consolidate control globally within every government, the media and entertainment industries, our education, our industries, our banking, and our very freedom of speech is under direct attack. And we've been seeing this more and more in the last few weeks, specifically. I find it interesting, and I'm gonna point out something extremely ironic here. When you look at the dichotomy of the left and the right, we're all fighting for things. Some of these things seem like they're separate. But the very people who have been funding and controlling this globalist system since long before World War II, before World War I, in World War II, people like the Bushes and the Rockefellers and the Fords and the Soroses are the very same people who are directly funding the organization of Black Lives Matter. Now, that's not to detract from the loving message that everybody wants to promote equality in whatever way they do that. But they're the same people who are funding all of these United Nations programs, projects, and appendages through the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda. And you can read this for yourself. All of this, everything, every word I'm saying is freely available on Google, and I encourage everybody to look this up for themselves. You can take ownership of your own thoughts and actions by doing that. Out of the Sustainable Development Agenda, they want digital currency globally for everyone. Bye-bye cash. What comes in with that? Pardon me.
Microchipping.
Exactly. Microchipping, biometric identification, global vaccine programs, and these global vaccine programs that the Gates Foundation and their likes have been funding and implementing, they have been using non-approved vaccines on people for decades.
Illegal.
They have been sterilizing hundreds of thousands of young women and girls in Africa and India and all kinds of other countries.
Genocide.
It is genocide. Massive wealth redistribution is a very, very big part of this Sustainable Development Agenda, and we've been seeing a lot of evidence of that over the last, well, since our little potato moved in here. How many billions and billions and billions of dollars are gone from our country that we'll never see the fruits of? Is there any accountability for that? Is there any actual oversight and tracking on where this money ends up and how it's allocated and used? I would love for somebody to give an answer to that isn't a hard no.
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
They have been devastating our industries in Canada, and it is through the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda that this is facilitated. These same people, the Soroses and the Rockefellers and all of these people, those are just some of the bigger names, and there's a lot more, funnel their money through organizations like Tides and promote anti-oil sands campaigns in Alberta and Saskatchewan and other Western provinces. But all of that is straight and directly out of the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda. You can look it up. Part of it includes no more funding for our natural resource development. What do you think that's going to do to our country? Through this United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda, they promote disarmament and gun bans. What Trudeau did is not a Trudeau agenda. It's not a Liberal agenda. It's not a Government of Canada agenda. It's a UN agenda. If you Google disarmament and UN Sustainable Development Agenda, you will find their own documents that list all of the Sustainable Development Agenda goals that disarmament applies to. The United Nations has its own office for disarmament. Why do you think that is? Is it about crime and mass murder? Or is it about control? Is it about making sure that you're not able to defend yourselves?
Exactly.
There's a reason why America has a Second Amendment.
Canada needs one.
We do. We do need something to protect our rights and abilities to defend ourselves. How many people in this country are peaceful gun owners and firearms owners? It's heartbreaking to see what they're trying to do. Part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda is the climate agenda. Started in the late 1960s through the Club of Rome, which Pierre Elliott Trudeau and Maurice Strong, among many others, were a part of. And I encourage everyone to look that up. The Club of Rome, started by Rockefeller and others, globalist agenda. These are the people who have been funding Greta Thunberg and scuttling around the world for her to spout her rhetoric and her propaganda. These are the people who have been exploiting this climate agenda for their own profiting. As we've seen in Michael Moore's newer film, Planet of the Humans, it's a racket. Also part of this United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda is the censorship of free speech, media control, and they keep moving the goalposts. What is hate speech? It's whatever they want it to be. If it conflicts with the narrative that they're promoting, it can be considered hateful and they can shut it down. So these are just some of the problems that are common amongst everybody here. None of these problems, like I said, they don't care about your gender. They don't care about your color. They don't care about your social status or your religion or your political party. But all of them are directly related to the United Nations, which every one of the parties sitting in this house fully promotes, whether you want to admit it to yourselves or not. The Conservative Party of Canada was responsible in 1992 for signing us on to Agenda 21. They were responsible in 1998 when they signed us on to the Sustainable Development Act. And they were responsible in 2015 when they signed us on to Agenda 2030. The continuity and the evolution of the globalist plan for world control. Now, like I said, I'm from Alberta. Thank you. I'm not here today as an Albertan. I'm here as a Canadian. And as much as I have a problem with our provincial government, and I do, I mean, you don't go to Bilderberg meetings and speak at Trilateral Commission events willy-nilly. But Jason Kenney, in November 2019, commissioned the Fair Deal Panel, which constituted consultations from Albertans in town halls, industry professionals and experts, as well as our MLAs. And they came up with a certain number of recommendations, and it's available on the internet. I highly recommend everyone check it out. When I said I'm not here as an Albertan, I want to read this next bit, but think about it, no matter what province you're from, and how this can apply to you and your province, not just Alberta. Because these are the things that we all need to do in order to get past where we are. In the riding next to mine, the Conservative candidate Drew Barnes is the MLA, and he was on the panel. He released on Facebook a couple of weeks ago his list of proposals based on that Fair Deal panel. These are proposals for serious changes in the process, organization, and function of our governments and the interrelationships between our federal and provincial governments. What is fair? What is equality? What does that mean? I hear a lot of talk about equality these days. I really don't see a whole lot of action to back up that talk. So do we actually really want equality for everybody and not just what we feel is equal for ourselves? Equalization. Is that fair to everybody?
No. Stop it.
Whether or not you're on the giving end or the receiving end, we got to be honest with ourselves. What can we change to improve these things? Do we need an honest review and a referendum?
Yes.
I agree. Taxation reform is another one that he has proposals for. Federal collection versus provincial collection and allocation and distribution of money. Do you guys have any idea, and I'm sure you do, how much money is wasted every year? Stolen and wasted on frivolous bullshit. The proposals that Drew Barnes has come up with want to limit the federal influence on our provincial matters, on things like healthcare and our resource development, on immigration and open provincial trade. Why do we have people in this building who think that they know how to run our provinces better than we do? We don't have a constitution. We have an illusion of a constitution. We don't have anything provincially that defines our values and our rights and our freedoms and the standards for accountability and transparency. Along with equality, I hear a lot of talk about accountability and transparency. Our little potato ran on it. How much accountability and transparency have we seen? None. None. We need some serious reformation in this country. We need to be able to have plebiscites and referendums on important issues that affect us. If we live in a democracy where our voices are supposed to count for something, we need to make them count for something. I respect my MP, and he's a good man, and he cares about the city of Brooks and the county of Newell. But when I email him, I get a canned response. And I don't blame him. In a way I do, in a way I don't. He's doing his job and he's doing what he's told to do. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we actually had the power to fire these people who are lying to us? Wouldn't it be great if there was a way that when they screw up so bad that we can just boot them out and then have already somebody else lined up ready to step in and take their place to do their jobs properly? We as citizens need that ability to make those choices and make these changes. Our opinions can actually count for something. And we don't have to rely on the controlled media and our elected representatives in this building in order to run our lives. Senate reform is another proposal that Drew Barnes spoke about, having proper proportional representation and incorporate that democratic reformation into the Senate reform. Free trade is another one, interprovincial trade barriers. It's a lot harder for some of our provinces to trade with one another than it is for us to trade with foreign countries. What kind of sense does that make? We can't get our natural resources moved around this country to where they need to be, and instead, what do? We buy our resources from foreign countries who have horrible human rights records, horrible environmental practices, some of them that would make you shudder in horror. This ties into our resource development. We need to decentralize our resource development. We need to have our provinces able to develop our natural resources the way that it's going to benefit all Canadians and everybody within each province. Industry boards that are run by bureaucrats do nothing. Industry boards that are run by professionals who work within the industry actually know how to get things done. Now, I wasn't always in the oil patch in Alberta, but 7 years ago I started for a company, and it wasn't until I started there that I understood the level of care and protection that goes into our resource development in Western Canada and in other places.
Yes.
I've been to camps where 5 years later you come back, it's not there. You wouldn't even know it was there to begin with. It's just a nice, beautiful patch of forest, because guess what? Nature laughs last. But our oil industry in Canada isn't just for gasoline and diesel and jet fuel. Every product, this podium that I'm standing in front of, the microphone that I'm holding in my hand, the smartphone in your pocket, and the flags around our city, provided that they're not made in China. Everything we touch, everything on a daily basis is dependent on oil. Getting rid of our oil industry in Alberta and in Western Canada will solve nothing, and in fact it will create a world of more problems, because guess what? We cannot run this entire country on wind power and solar power. That is asinine. And what is going to happen when everyone starts driving an electric car? How are we going to, if you try and wrap your mind around that for 2 seconds, you will see how absolutely absurd it is.
Can't make a battery without oil.
I've worked on pipelines. I've cleaned up oil spills. I've seen the care and the duty of my fellow oil field workers that goes into it. You guys would have no idea how strict the regulations are that we have to follow. How many tickets and orientations that we have to have for safety. The meetings that we have every day for upwards of an hour and a half sometimes in different places, to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing and that everyone is safe. And guess what? People still get hurt. It's a dangerous job. I've seen it. I've been there. I've been out in minus 50 weather before many times. I've been up in plus 40 weather many times, fracking and inspecting and doing all kinds of different things that the companies that I've worked for do. And all of it goes so that we can heat our homes and enjoy the level of comfort that we have in this amazing country. I was on a frack once. The field next to where we were fracking, the poor farmer's baler caught on fire. So what did we do? Well, our fire unit drove around and put the fire out. Saved the man, I don't know how much money. It was an amazing thing to see. All the farmers coming around for miles and miles and miles because they saw the smoke, and how relieved they were that we were there to help save the man's equipment and his fields and his livelihood. It was something else.
Yeah.
We have to make life and death decisions some days when we're doing these jobs. And I really take it personally when you have little leftist pipsqueaks who think they know what they're talking about when it comes to developing our resources, and they just want to shut it down. They are so ungrateful, it makes me sick. So it's time we start being honest with each other, but it's also time that we're honest with ourselves. When I was a boy, a good family friend of ours told me something that I've thought about many times over the last 25 plus years. He said to me, Greg, what are the fundamental values that you have and that you fight for? And at the time, it didn't really resonate with me. I didn't quite understand what he was talking about. But as I get older, that question that I keep asking myself gains more and more importance. So we have a decision to make here as Canadians. We have to make a choice right now, this very minute, to stand up and fight for what we believe in. And not only do that, but to get involved. We have limited time. We have limited resources. And there is a freight train coming down the tracks at us. So do we stand for hate, lies, servitude, disgrace, division? Or do we actually stand for equality and love and truth and freedom and honor and unity? It's that simple, everyone. It's that simple. You make the choice right now. Do we stand for these things unconditionally, regardless of our race, our gender, our religion, and the political party we support? Because if we don't, then what the hell are we doing here?
Exactly.
Every thought, every word, every action must represent those values that we stand up for. We cannot fight with hate, or we cannot fight hate with hate, or violence with violence. And I've seen so much of that in the last however long. It has been unreal what I have seen. But if every single one of us can make that choice, we can stand together in unity and we can take care of these things. So there are many solutions to our problems. I'm not identifying solutions here, I'm identifying our common problems. And we have several different solutions that we can employ. But before we can talk about solutions, we have to be willing to do three things. And I want you to all think about this. And I want you, more importantly, when you go back home to your cities and provinces, I want you to talk about these things with your family and your friends and your coworkers and your neighbors and your strangers in your communities who you don't know. Number one, we need to stop trusting the mainstream media and our government. Because they lie and lie and lie. Number two, we need to start listening to each other and thinking for ourselves. Number three, we need to focus on the root of our problems and not on the problems that affect us all individually, like race, gender, religion, and politics. The face of which is the UN Sustainable Development Agenda. Now, there are mostly good things in the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda. I don't want to say that they're all bad, because we should take care of our environment. We should take care of our poorer citizens that need our help. There are so many things in that agenda that we must do. But the shiny, friendly mask on that beast of the United Nations is something that we need to recognize. And we also need to recognize that we can accomplish these things on our own. As a country, as provinces, and as communities. If we can unite behind our core values of love, truth, equality, and freedom, and work to solve our common disputes, and put aside all of our differences, we will solve our problems, and the smaller problems will solve themselves. We need to come together and unite as a country in this effort. Thank you very much. God bless Canada. God bless all of you.